Hi, I'm Belinda Friezer and I'm presenting to you today from Sydney, Australia. I will be talking to you about the research conducted as part of my recently completed PhD study, which examined how infants behave with one another in similar aged peer groups in long day care across the first 2 years of life. Now, before I talk about the research, I would like to introduce you to the authors of this presentation. Here you can see me on the left of the screen, and beside me are my two co-authors, Professor Linda Harrison and Dr. Sheena Elwick. Both Linda and Sheena were my PhD supervisors and closely involved in the research that I will discuss today. Now, research shows that infants have the capacity to interact in similar age peer groups in both laboratory and early childhood education and care settings. Now, the laboratory-based research provides detailed descriptions of infants' behaviour under the age of 12 months in groups of 3 and 4, whilst the early childhood education and care research provides detailed descriptions of infants' behaviour over 12 months of age in group care settings. Now, prior research has mostly focused on describing infants' behaviour in similar age peer groups across very brief periods of time. These descriptions are valuable, though, because they show us that infants are busy socialising, expressing themselves and communicating in peer groups at given points in time. However, they just don't provide the information about how these capacities develop or change across time, change across longer periods of time, such as the first 2 years of life. This information is needed as it is quite likely that there will be increasing numbers of infants entering early childhood care and education who will require support in acquiring the skills necessary for negotiating peer group play. This is because the aim of the United Nations Target 4.2 of the Sustainable Development Goal is to ensure that all young children have access to quality early childhood development, care and pre-primary education by the year 2030. Now, my research question was, how do infants interact in groups in long day care across the first 2 years of life? To answer this question, I used a mixed methods research design. Participants were 45 infants, of which 20 were focused infants aged 3 to 21 months. 4 early childhood educators from 2 long day care centres in Sydney, Australia, also took part in the study. Both long day care centres were managed by one large, long-standing, not-for-profit organisation. One centre was located in a park in a suburban area in Sydney, and the other centre was close to the CBD and was in a high-rise. Now, the general characteristics of the infants. From this table, you can see that the infants came from a variety of ethnic backgrounds and spoke languages other than English at home. Now, the unit of analysis that I used was the triad, which is a third infant interacting with an infant peer dyad. Now, the idea of the triad originated with the German sociologist George Simmel, who used it to understand the social processes that occur in adult groups. He conceived the notion that the dyad shifts from being 2 individuals to a collective when a third person is present. The triad is a useful unit of analysis because it highlights the potential influence of the third infant's behaviour on the relationship between the dyad and vice versa, therefore allowing for the dynamics of small peer groups to be studied. So what I did was I filmed each of the focused infants when they were the third infant in a triad every 2 to 3 months across a 19-month period, and noticed their age in months and their gross motor behaviour. The remaining 25 of the 40 infants had the potential to be one of the infants in the dyad. After each filming cycle, I interviewed the educators whilst showing them the video footage that had recently been collected. As the educators watched the video, I asked for their thoughts and feelings about the infant's behaviour as a way to gain new understandings about infants' interactions in groups. Now, during data collection, I also developed a reliable coding system, which consisted of 2 coding schemes that could be used to observe infant interactions in a triad. The first coding scheme defined and described the primary interactions to be studied. These were link and linking, which are the interactions that occur between the dyad, and secondary linking, which are the interactions that occur when a third infant is in the company of a dyad. The second coding schemes consisted of a list of behaviours used to identify third infant's actions during secondary linking. Together, these 2 coding schemes were used to identify secondary linking in the video recordings that I had collected. Now, in total, I collected 564 observations of secondary linking and conducted 18 interviews. Now, qualitative analysis involved descriptive analysis, correlation analysis, and cross-tabulation with chi-square analysis. Descriptive analysis of the video data examined the frequency of occurrence of third infant's behaviours. Correlation analysis using Pearson's coefficient was used to test the degree to which third infant's behaviours were associated with infant age. Cross-tabulation with chi-square analysis was used to test the degree to which third infant's behaviours were associated with gross motor ability. Qualitative analysis. In the qualitative analysis, the interviews were analysed using a structural and thematic approach. Qualitative and quantitative results were brought together at the end of the study and understood using concepts of infant social development and dynamic systems theory. Now, the frequencies and association among observed infant peer behaviours and interactions indicated that third infants were watching the dyad and what they were doing. When looking at the table, you can see that the looking behaviours were common amongst third infants. All 20 infants looked at the infant in the dyad or both from afar. 19 looked at what the dyad were focused on, such as a toy. 17 shifted their gaze from one infant in the dyad to the other and then back again. And 15 followed the gaze of one of the infants in the dyad to what they were looking at. Looking behaviours were also frequent, particularly the looking behaviour where infants looked at an infant in the dyad or at a dyad from afar. This type of looking behaviour was observed in 86.3% of the secondary linking episodes. Now, the frequencies and associations among observed infant peer behaviours and interactions also indicated that third infants were expressing themselves and engaging in social communications with the dyad by vocalising, smiling and frowning and self-soothing and engaging in imitative and shared communicative acts with the dyad. So overall, 15 of the 20 third infants vocalised during secondary linking. And vocalising included behaviours such as squealing, gurgling and babbling, and they occurred in 12.9% of the secondary linking episodes. 13 of the third infants also expressed themselves by smiling and frowning. Smiling occurred in 12.8% of the secondary linking episodes and frowning in 4.6%. 16 infants also engaged in behaviours that can express a need for self-soothing, such as toy and blanket sucking, thumb sucking, or finger and hand sucking. These types of behaviours occurred in 9.4% of the observations. Third infants imitating their peers in the dyad was also common, being demonstrated by more than half of the infants. In addition, comparative analysis by age and gross motor ability showed that the older third infants, whose gross motor ability was more developed, were the infants who were more likely to engage in imitative acts during secondary linking. Imitative behaviours are important in communication. According to the developmental psychologists Meltzoff and Marshall, it plays a key role in how infants learn about themselves and share communication within the cultural and social world they find themselves in. Now, just under half of the third infants also demonstrated shared communicative acts with the infants in the triad. Third infants mutually tuned in with the infants by engaging in simultaneous and timed interactions involving bodily movements, vocalizations, and shared emotion. These interactions can appear as joyfully dancing or rhythmically tapping objects and vocalizing together. Or they could appear to be more chaotic and uncoordinated, as in rough and tumble play, or three or more infants excitedly converging on a toy or a game, or all three infants tumbling and falling on top of each other accidentally. These interactions are known as collective intersubjective experiences, and through them infants share feelings, thoughts, and experiences proprioceptively, that is, through the body. Now, these interactions that I've been describing only last for very brief periods of time, and they occur repeatedly and continuously throughout the childcare day. Correlation analysis and chi-square showed weak correlations between behaviours and interactions, suggesting that no fixed combination of third infants' behaviours had emerged during secondary linking. This meant that whilst third infants were interacting and communicating with the dyad, they were doing this in a variety of ways and with no particular set pattern across the first 2 years of life. Now, as a result of the third infant's behaviour, changes in the group also occurred. During secondary linking, infants of all ages and stages of gross motor ability could take a pause from the interaction. Now, pauses involved either a brief look or movement away from another peer in the dyad. When an infant in the dyad paused, the third infant could engage the remaining infant to form a new dyad. The infant who had paused returned to the interaction as the new third infant. In these instances, the infants in the triad had changed social positions. So the third infant who was on the outside now becomes part of the dyad, and the infant in the dyad who had paused now becomes the new third infant. Now, the small peer group dynamic could also end in a variety of ways. The third infant could leave the group for a variety of reasons, such as to look at an educator, or their actions could break the linking between the peers or the interaction between the peers. Now, findings from the analysis of the interview data show that educators had noticed that third infants were watching the dyad, which is the same as the quantitative results. Many educators thought that third infants were interested in and curious about the dyad, the nature of their play and emotions. In particular, some educators thought that third infants were trying to work out what was happening between the peers, with one educator noting that a third infant was trying to understand the play for possible future involvement in it. Educators' comments suggested that third infants were learning about the relationship between the peers in the dyad. Now, educators also noticed the many ways that third infants interacted with the dyad. They primarily thought that third infants were motivated to come into the dyad because they wanted something from the interaction or from one or both of the peers in the dyad. In particular, some educators thought that the third infants were motivated by a desire to join in and feel the same connection that the dyad was experiencing, or were motivated by a desire to experience a sense of togetherness or belongingness with them. For the most part, they felt that this was true, regardless of whether third infants were predominantly focused on what the dyad were playing with or solely attentive to one or both infants in the dyad. Even when a third infant was seen to come into the dyad with his back towards his peers, the educator interpreted this as him wanting the togetherness of the group. Likewise, the behaviour of infants who do not fully come into the infant peer dyad were also thought to be wanting to join in, but unsure how to join in or not ready to join in or waiting to be invited in. So overall, the study showed that infant peer groups were an open and flexible system that consisted of these very fleeting group interactions and social communications, which had the potential to change the dynamic of the group. In infant peer groups, the third infants were wanting to learn about the relationship between their peers and to be a part of that relationship. Now, that's the end of my presentation, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Bye for now.